Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. Here we are a week past, almost a week past Election Day. And when we got together with him prior to that, he had some very interesting insight on the polling aspect of elections and where that comes from. And by the way, that's through a scientific lens, because he's somebody that has dealt in that area for decades. So much he's done, many eureka moments involving social phenomenons, and he's back with us. He's our professional of the year. Grant Venerable is on the show with us. Hey, Grant, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Steve.
I'm curious as we gather post-election, and I was watching the results come in, thinking about you and our conversation of how they mirrored, or maybe not, the poll results, and found it fascinating. Nail-biting, of course, but and I don't do politics. I'm not talking about any particular candidate at all. This is just what was being put out there in the media by way of these polls. Were you thinking about that when you were watching the election results?
I was, because I wanted to see what the real polls were saying, namely the ballots. And I wasn't too terribly over-anxious about it. I was put on my scientific cap, and as an observer, of a very critically thinking observer. What it did take me back to, and I want to start this way, is the recognition that every single one of us 8 billion human beings on Earth, everyone is the product of their upbringing, their parents, their early childhood experiences. They're all their potentialities as a creative Homo sapiens species, but they're also the result of what some of my colleagues call the core traumas of life. That's trauma, T-R-A-U-M-A. And that is virtually what everyone experiences. There's some devastating experience that will shape the rest of one's life. Everyone listening to this can also reflect on a core trauma, and they know what it is because it follows us for the rest of our lives. I had several core traumas. I had 3 by the time I was 8 years of age, and they all involved the death of people close to me. The death of a childhood friend at age 4 or 5, the death of my paternal grandmother, my own mother, and those events had a very deep impact on how I developed. I could have given up, but my own particular makeup would not let me do that, and my wise father helped guide me through thinking, reasoning. The other thing here is I reflected on my undergraduate days, which was at UCLA in the early 1960s, and then my postgraduate days, University of Chicago, in the late 1960s, and how I became aware of one of my key areas of intellectual excellence. It was not that favored in college, but it was not discouraged, fortunately, in the particular schools where I went. It was this. To get a PhD, one actually has to focus and be singularly minded on what they're doing. They can't play around and branch out into other things that they might think about as interesting to study. And so if you have a great professor like I did, Jack Halpern, at the University of Chicago, he kept my nose to the grindstone, pointed scrupulously on the specific topic that we were studying in radiation chemistry and the reactions that we were producing in the laboratory at the Argonne National Laboratory. I'm saying that because that is when I discovered and embraced the fact that I found in the physical sciences in particular tools and principles for understanding social behavior of human beings in organizations, in politics, in government, in corporations, because I began to see the etchings of my chemical principles in various other fields. And I would follow this on television, on radio, in the newspapers, in the magazines that I read. And I said, I understand that. I understand it through the principle of resonance in chemistry. So that's where we are. Resonance is the great issue underlying every election. But this one is like a recycled election from 1824, when we had a lot of very interesting people on the scene, such as James Monroe, who became a president. We had John Quincy Adams. We had Andrew Jackson. We had others that pointed us toward the Civil War era. But John Quincy Adams won the election in the House of Representatives. There's been debates about that leading up to the 2024 election. What if the particular candidate or no candidate got a majority of votes and it could be thrown into the House? And I think it was seriously doubted that that would happen. Well, it did happen with John Quincy Adams. There were 3 candidates, and no one got a majority. One of them was Jackson. No one got a majority, and the Constitution pointed it for the House of Representatives to settle. So that's how John Quincy Adams became president. Now, fast forward 100 years to the 1920s. The 1920s was practically a pig's breakfast in politics and economics in the United States. I don't say that disrespectfully. I say it because it was a circus of unexpected and some expected things. After Woodrow Wilson left office in 1920, and his wife really had been running the country because he was ill, then we had Harding come into office, which his presidency was marred by some important scandals. One was the Teapot Dome scandal around oil fields in California, around the Doheny family. Then that gave way to Silent Cal, Calvin Coolidge, in the middle 20s, elected 1924. But Cal was kind of a quiet presidency. I mean, he kept his nose clean. That gave way to the Hoover administration and finally to Roosevelt. But the 1924 election was Silent Calvin Coolidge. That brings us to the 2024 election. My brain is able to see patterns. And so I looked it up and I said, there's some similar patterns way back 200 years ago. And those are overlooked by except a few very insightful scholarly journalists. Otherwise, it gets overlooked. But we come up to where we are today, and what we're getting to is a tendency that human Homo sapiens can't seem to get away from. So in the journalistic community, everyone shifts gears into Monday morning quarterbacking. Everyone is shopping out their latest theories about, this happened, this candidate succeeded, this one did not succeed because of their favorite, whatever it is, stories they like to tell, theories about political science. And that's as far as it goes. But what it did was it got my scientific brain going again, looking at, what are the scientific principles that are really at work that journalists don't really study, and not much study is going on in those fields much in the social sciences, the humanities, that are grounded in the physical sciences. And what are the dominant theories today? Quantum physics. NOVA was on the last week. It had excellent NOVA adventures on quantum entanglement. What is that? It was developed by a Caltech student who was a classmate of one of my Caltech friends that graduated in 1964. He went out to prove, that was his goal, because he didn't believe in quantum entanglement. But basically that is a theory that says that a subatomic particle can communicate with another subatomic particle just like itself, and they become entangled forever. They develop this romantic relationship, as it were. They become bound, joined at the hip, as it were. And no matter how far they get apart, the pilot particle always affects the other particle. Whatever state it decides to dwell in, it will flip to that state and cause the other particle to flip to that state. Are you following me here, Stephen?
Yeah, 100%. And I would like to go back to one thing you said earlier, and we've never talked about this, but I feel it's impactful. The traumas that we suffer when we're younger, and many believe it's between the ages of birth and 7, that shape our adult life. And we're little kids trying to figure out how to live life in a big world, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah, but would you say, Grant, that all of us have suffered traumas, big or small, and we should really address them at some point in our lives to really move our lives forward?
You hit the point. You've targeted. You've really pulled it out. All of our major geopolitical issues are based upon individual core traumas.
Wow.
And the wars in East Africa, the wars in the Middle East, the war going on in Gaza, Lebanon, you mention it. One of our great traumas in the United States, of the conflicts, people not being able to agree and all that, it starts in core traumas. If they're not handled, they affect everyone around us if we have influence over people. Well, I learned that from psychotherapists that I've worked with as fellow scholars in California. And I worked hard to deal with my core traumas through talented therapists and group therapeutic process. What you have are leaders in the world that never dealt with their core traumas.
Wow. You know what? I never thought of that. Oh my gosh. Aha moment. Because in my journey, I identified that what we're talking about, realized that, in fact, it was, 3 years ago, I'm into all different modalities, open to trying different things. So
yes, you are. Yes.
I said to a hypnotherapist, take me, I know where I'm going. Take me right back to my childhood. That was it. I knew that's where I needed to go back. Not that it was a bad childhood, but there's stuff that we all have to deal with.
You've hit it. The positive side of trauma, once one treats it, can lead to major results. For me, it led to the discovery of the Venn matrix of a system. How did it do that? By my willingness to observe what happened to me within the family. I had a very large extended family, and that was a key to it, because there was always 2 or 3 people in the family outside the nuclear immediate family who were right there with us every week, every 2 weeks, to make sure all of our needs as kids were met, but also to deal with feeling hurt, to feeling our grieving reactions. In the process, I mean, there were unrelated people in the extended family. There were people from different religions from my own parents, but they were all close friends of my parents. I'm saying all this to say that I learned an appreciation of the role of the extended family. They were observant people. They anticipated our kids' needs even before that need arose. That was important around puberty, when my dad didn't know how to deal with girls' needs like mothers do. But what did that mean? That it meant that female relatives, distant and close, came close and made sure my sister had all of her needs met until she was an adult woman. I had my needs met by various friends other than my father, but this did not happen with... I have to go back now to what happened during Nazi Germany, when a particular individual there began invading surrounding countries and left a big dent in the world system after it was all over. And then there were people, large ethnic, religious groups of people who were severely injured or killed off. Those that survived, who were fortunate, met their needs with talented psychotherapists. Those that did that were able to transcend the difficulties that would come up from core traumas later in life. Those that never got the therapy to deal with what happened in the Holocaust never got over the Holocaust, and it means their professional lives were directed at missing getting over the Holocaust. It happens with every group of people, every individual. Whatever they did not complete in their core traumas, it came out in their personal behaviors that ended up hurting a lot of people. Those that were able to deal with the core traumas ended up helping a lot of people. That's what happened to me in the classroom. I became a professor who was particularly sensitive to how the students could learn chemistry in new ways other than a traditional lecture method of A, B, and C, but in helping them to think on their own. Now, am I making a dent here?
100%. But I'm still focused on the people who are elected, those leading countries, and not having worked on their traumas and how that affects how they govern and make decisions.
Well,
wow.
I think the poor Putin over in Russia, 60 Minutes last night was just really unnerving almost. That is obviously a man who never got over any of his core traumas. So he directs it into his leadership style and how he expresses his desires and sentiments for the rest of the world. He's not the only one. But this is something I've had to be very careful of, and I've been reading these accounts of why did the election come out, and I'm saying, look, we're not looking at what happened in our own history as human beings, as scientists, as Homo sapiens developing over the evolutionary period from the chimpanzees, but everything came from the reptiles before the mammals. But all of those brains are still in our human brain. The reptilian brain is at the bottom of the stack. When we get desperate enough as humans, our reptilian instincts come out. That sounds funny, but
no, it doesn't. but it doesn't. I will admit, if we had this conversation 5 years ago, it would sound a little weird to me. But having done a lot of work, studying a lot of this, the reptilian brain is everything. It's what's kept us alive for centuries.
And among guys in the locker room, scholars talking. Reptiles run across little objects and living things in nature, and they make a quick decision. Well, I can't eat it, so what do I do? Oh, I can fornicate with it. Oh, if I can't do that, then I put my waist on it and keep moving. Now, there's, common terms that we use in the locker room for all of that, but that's basically what we fall into if we get so frustrated that we revert to reptilian instincts instead of our Homo sapiens wisdom. Governments.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Governments get the same way.
Isn't it fascinating how all of this is really designed to protect us, but at the same time it can hinder us because it gets in the way.
Hinder.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, that's really what my memoir gets to in the conclusion, is how to protect ourselves from our own core traumas that we can never. I mean, they're always with us in our brain cells. And if we can get past that, we all can live together in harmony in this world.
I can't believe we're talking about this today. I really, and I can't believe how I never thought that after realizing how the core traumas as we're growing up can affect our political leaders. They're still when somebody says, Steve, Grant, you're acting like a child. We are.
Yeah. That's what happens. The child takes over.
Right.
Not the whole child, but the injured child.
Did you say the injured or engine?
The injured.
Yes.
As in injury.
Yeah.
The wounded child is a term in psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they say we need to re-parent ourselves, it's as if we need to look at those things and then be our own parent. A lot of times in even hypnotherapy, one of the effective ways to work with somebody is you reassure yourself now as an adult to your younger self. And
yes.
Very impactful. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
No, you did. Very, very interesting looking at all of this. Had no idea we'd go down the road of traumas, but I've learned, studied, and you to a major degree. Lots of insight here. Thank you, Grant, for being here and our Man of the Year. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Stephen.
Be well. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.